This video provides an example of how to explicitly compare the everyday meaning of science term with its science meaning. Task Talk and tools play a role in helping students explicitly think about the meaning of a particular science term. Students in this video were engaged in the tasks that required them to recognize and explain how their use of everyday terms relates to science concepts. As you watch, think about how the teacher used written scaffolds as a tool to communicate ideas. Also, how does the teacher use particular talk moves to press students to explain more about their use of language? At the beginning of the 6th grade physics unit about force and motion, the teacher engaged students in observational tasks to elicit their thinking about what forces influence motion. First, she had students drag wooden blocks across different carpet samples to feel the differences and begin to explain what would cause the need for different amounts of pulling force. Then students observed teachers rollerblading in the hallway, paying attention to how they start moving, glide, and stop. This video shows the next lesson warm-up, where students discuss the words speed, velocity, and acceleration, comparing their everyday use with the science meaning. Designing short but explicit tasks to tune students into differences in how we use words in everyday life versus science contexts is helpful for all learners, but particularly English language learners. This next clip shows how the teacher introduces the explicit task, where students will identify how they've heard the word acceleration used in everyday situations versus how the word is used in physics.
So here's what I would like you to do. We're going to take, maybe a minute on question of the day. Okay, so I'm going to slide this up. Okay, here's what I'd like you to do. Please draw this Venn diagram, like a double bubble. Acceleration is a physics idea, but it's also a word that we use to describe everyday things like cars. Okay, so I would like you to compare what are you thinking about so far for acceleration in physics versus acceleration like the way that people might talk about it with cars or something like that. So in a Venn diagram, you place things that are different in the outside parts, things that are the same in the inside part. Okay, so take maybe 1 minute to do this by yourself, and then I'm going to have you turn to your neighbor and talk about your Venn diagram.
The teacher intentionally directed students to use a Venn diagram to make a comparison between the everyday use versus the science use of the words. Students have a copy of the Venn diagram in front of them as a tool to help them organize their thoughts. They have time to individually consider the question and write on their own Venn diagram before sharing their ideas in pairs. In this next clip, the teacher visits pairs of students to listen in and prompt students to say more about how the words speed, velocity, and acceleration are used differently.
So you're thinking they're totally different? That acceleration in physics is totally different from acceleration in everyday?
No, you can use it either way.
So what do you feel like is related about them?
They both use like velocity.
So when your mom talks about her car, she says what velocity it's
My mom
going?
does not know what velocity is. My mom doesn't talk to me about her car.
Or like on a car commercial, you're saying that they would say like
per hour.
So what's that? Miles per hour.
That's your speed.
Okay, so then what's an acceleration? So you're saying that in everyday language about cars, the miles per hour is a speed and an acceleration. Like you're saying it's kind of the same thing in everyday language. Okay, but then what about in physics?
In physics, it's velocity.
So
The
you're saying
change in velocity.
oh, it's the change in velocity. That's
Divided by the
acceleration.
time it took.
Okay, so you're saying in physics, it's the change in velocity divided by the time that it took. But in everyday language, acceleration is just speed.
Yeah, like the miles per hour.
Okay, so it sounds like that you're thinking that they're sort of two totally different ways of saying acceleration. That everyday acceleration is like totally different.
Like they seem like
Okay.
they can be the same, but then I never hear the word velocity. I'm just like this is just now time like
Right, it's kind of just a physics word.
Everybody's just talking about my car can go like 100,000 miles per hour or something like that. Yeah, like
Yeah. Okay. So when other people share their idea, you might be able to add something to the middle of your Venn diagram. Because right now you
but
don't
how
have
else can acceleration be used in everyday life?
So you're going to listen really close when other people are talking and see if you can add something. Maybe you just have it already. Okay?
Finally, the teacher brings the conversation to the whole class in order to share ideas, and she expects students to add ideas and examples to their Venn diagrams.
They usually measure it in like miles, and then in physics they measure it in like any kind of units, like feet, kilometers, inches.
Okay, so you're saying that in everyday life, acceleration is in miles, but in physics, it's in kilometers, feet, inches, like all different kinds of units?
Yeah.
Okay, so does anybody have something that they would like to add or change about Samson's idea? Okay, Kalina?
Well, when I think about like are we talking about like the difference or like what?
Either way.
Okay, like the difference. I think like the difference is like a lot of people don't say like in everyday language. They don't say, well, the acceleration is the velocity divided by the period of time, and so I think they more take it as in like miles is just speed, and not like okay, it's velocity. So I don't think they take it as velocity. They just take it speed and miles.
Okay. So you're saying that the difference is in physics, you use the word velocity and you would talk about the change in velocity over a period of time, but in everyday language, people would just talk about speed. They wouldn't
Yeah.
really talk about velocity.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to take one more idea and then we're going to go out in the hall. Okay, Liliana, what's your idea?
Adding to Helena's, like, when it's science, they like use more specific words, like more, like special words that are like, you don't say it like normally. You just don't say it a lot unless you're like doing science, cause yeah, and like they usually just say miles per hour. When
In regular, like
Yeah.
just talking about regular things?
when you're talking normally, so they don't use like that big of words.
Okay. Okay, so it's like you're saying that there's special words just for talking about physics compared to everyday stuff.
Well, they use it mostly for you.
Okay. All right. So keep your orange paper out on your table. We're going to keep coming back to this today. I think by the end of today, you're going to have way more ideas about what acceleration is.
The intentional and explicit task of comparing everyday meaning and science meaning shows how the teacher wants to connect students' lives with what they do in the science classroom. In this next clip, the teacher shares how she includes everyday language and everyday experiences to help students reason about science ideas.
I tried to pre-think of things that I know that they experience on a daily basis, like all of our kids ride in buses a lot, whether it's metro buses or school buses. So we have lots of ideas about like stopping and starting and sliding across the seat, turning a corner, you know, that they have these common experiences of being a passenger on a bus or and sometimes a passenger in a car. So we talked, I have a lot of questions built into the unit about what does the seatbelt feel like when your mom slams on the brakes, you know, or when what does it feel like when you're not wearing a seatbelt and the bus driver slams on the brakes, you know, so there's lots of motion phenomena that they've experienced. But then
Explicit activities such as the Venn diagram warm-up help students see the nuanced ways we use language in different contexts and also what kinds of meaning these words bring with them. Provide students with a structured way to compare and record their thinking. This tool helps students remember their ideas and also serves as a tool over time that students can revisit later on in the unit. Finally, press students to share more about their everyday experiences and invite others to add on. This type of explicit comparison task is more beneficial for students because it anchors the talk partly in their own lived experience. By allowing students to discuss their everyday observations, many more students will participate and contribute to the discussion because they can speak from their own experience.